Disclaimer: the following drama is entirely fictional and presented for entertainment purposes. The names, companies, residences, transactions, and circumstances in this story do not represent actual people or real-world entities. Hello, everyone. What would you do if your millionaire husband accidentally sent you the breakup text meant for another woman while you were carrying his child? Keep listening, because Claire Bennett's 6-word reply opens a door Grant thought he had locked forever. Subscribe if you enjoy mature relationship dramas with believable consequences, and stay with Claire as midnight approaches. The cruelest lies don't always arrive as confessions. Sometimes they arrive by accident. The phone buzzed at 12:08 a.m. Claire Bennett almost didn't look. She was standing alone inside the nursery of their Upper East Side townhouse, 7 months pregnant, folding a pale pink blanket beneath the warm glow of a small brass lamp. Rain traced silver lines down the windows. Somewhere downstairs, the grandfather clock counted another minute Grant wasn't home. Claire ran her fingers over the name embroidered into the blanket. Sophie, their daughter. Grant had chosen the name. The message appeared on Claire's secondary eSIM, a number she used mainly for nonprofit work and had never asked Grant to save. Sabrina Cole had recently changed the private number she used with Grant. He kept it out of his contacts and typed it from memory when he wanted to reach her discreetly. That night, he entered one digit incorrectly. The number he entered belonged to Claire. The sender was Grant. It's over. Delete our pictures. Don't contact me again. The blanket slipped from Claire's fingers. For several seconds, she heard nothing except rain. Then Sophie kicked. Claire instinctively pressed one hand against her belly. Delete our pictures. Not files. Not documents. Pictures. Claire checked the line again. Grant had not opened a thread labeled Claire and somehow failed to notice his wife's name. He had sent a breakup text to an unsaved number he believed belonged to someone else. By pure chance, that number was one of Claire's. Her husband was Grant Bennett, 38 years old, founder of Bennett Capital, the millionaire businessman magazines described as disciplined, private, devoted to family. There were photographs of Grant smiling beside Claire at charity galas. Photographs of him kissing her pregnant belly. Photographs of the perfect husband. And somewhere tonight, apparently, there were other photographs he wanted another woman to delete. Stay with me, because Grant Bennett had just made one careless mistake, and his pregnant wife was about to discover how much of her marriage existed behind a locked screen. Claire didn't call him. She didn't type, "Who is she?" She didn't scream. Instead, she stared at his message until the first shock hardened into something quieter. Memory. The phone turned face down at dinner. The unexplained Manhattan receipt. The unfamiliar button beneath the passenger seat of Grant's Mercedes. His sudden business meetings every Thursday night. Each memory had once arrived alone. Tonight, they arrived together. Claire looked toward the empty crib. She could confront Grant now. He would deny everything. He would explain. Grant always had explanations. And by morning, whatever existed on his phone could disappear. Claire wiped one tear from her cheek. Then she did something Grant would never have expected. She replied as if the message had reached exactly the woman he intended. "Come over. I'll make you forget." Her thumb hovered. Then pressed send. Delivered. Claire's pulse thundered. 10 seconds. 20. 3 gray dots appeared. Vanished. Returned. Her breathing became shallow. Finally, Grant replied. "Our place. 1 a.m.? Claire stared at the screen. Our place. Not a hotel. Not a first mistake. A place belonging to two people who had been there enough times to call it theirs. Claire slowly stood. She had no idea where our place was. Grant didn't know that. She typed, "Yes." The answer came almost immediately. "Give me 20. Claire lowered the phone. Outside, thunder rolled over the dark Manhattan sky. Inside the nursery, Sophie kicked again beneath her mother's hand. Claire looked at the wedding ring on her finger. 20 minutes. That was how long her husband believed he had before meeting his mistress, and how long Claire Bennett had to find the address of the marriage Grant had been living behind hers. 6 months earlier, Claire Bennett still believed a marriage could survive almost anything if two people kept choosing each other. She had been choosing Grant for years. Before Bennett Capital occupied 3 floors of a Manhattan tower, before business magazines photographed him beside private investors and called him one of the city's rising financial minds, Claire remembered the smaller version of their life. Takeout dinners. Cheap coffee. Grant asleep beside spreadsheets at 2 in the morning, while Claire corrected presentations he needed before sunrise. She had loved him before anyone cared what his name was worth. And when Claire became pregnant, she believed Sophie would complete the life they had built together. At first, Grant seemed to believe it too. He attended appointments. He kissed Claire's stomach. He ordered an absurdly expensive crib because, he said, my daughter gets the best. Then something changed. Slowly, quietly. Grant began coming home after Claire was asleep. Thursday dinners appeared on his calendar without client names. His phone, once abandoned anywhere in the house, began living face down beside his hand. The first strange thing Claire found was a restaurant receipt from Manhattan. Dinner for two. 2 glasses of wine. 1 dessert. Grant had told her he was meeting 4 investors that evening. Client changed plans, he said when she asked. He kissed her forehead and continued answering emails. Claire accepted it. Weeks later, she found a small pearl button beneath the passenger seat of his Mercedes. It belonged to a woman's blouse. Grant barely glanced at it. Sabrina rode with me after the board meeting. Probably hers. Sabrina Cole, Senior Vice President at Bennett Capital. Claire knew her. Everyone did. Sabrina was intelligent, polished, and always perfectly composed. She had attended Claire's baby shower carrying a silver bracelet for Sophie. Grant is so lucky to have you, Sabrina had said while hugging her. Claire remembered thanking her. That memory felt different now. At 12:13 a.m., standing inside the nursery with Grant's wrong number text glowing in her hand, Claire suddenly saw every forgotten detail at once. The receipt. The button. Thursday nights. A faint perfume on Grant's scarf. A Sunday afternoon when he claimed an emergency meeting lasted 5 hours. None of those moments had been proof. That was what made betrayal so easy to hide. 1 lie could look innocent. 10 lies could still look unrelated if someone loved you enough to keep explaining them away. Claire looked at the clock. Grant had said 20 minutes. She had already used 5. Think, she whispered. Sophie shifted beneath her ribs. Then Claire remembered the library. Grant had replaced his personal laptop 3 months earlier after complaining the old one was too slow. The previous laptop still sat inside the bottom cabinet of the built-in desk. Claire moved quickly downstairs. The house was dark except for security lights spilling across the hardwood floor. She opened the cabinet. There it was. Silver. Dust along the edge. She carried it to the desk and pressed the power button. The screen glowed. Password. Claire tried Grant's birthday. Wrong. Their anniversary. Wrong. Then she entered the date they had first heard Sophie's heartbeat. The desktop opened. Claire stared at it. Grant had forgotten to sign out of his cloud account. Calendar. Email notifications. Saved receipts. Everything began synchronizing. Then a map notification appeared from an old ride service receipt. Thursday, 10:42 p.m. Destination, Manhattan. Claire clicked it. Another Thursday appeared. Same destination. Then another. And another. Her pulse quickened as the address resolved on the screen. The Beaumont. Claire leaned closer. Unit 2207. Upstairs, the nursery waited for a father Claire thought she knew. Downstairs, his old laptop had just shown her where the other version of him went every Thursday night. The address was real. That was the part Claire Bennett wanted desperately not to be true. At 12:19 a.m., she sat beneath the cold blue light of Grant's old laptop, staring at the same Manhattan destination repeated across months of ride receipts. The Beaumont. Unit 2207. Thursday after Thursday. Sometimes Tuesday. Twice on Saturdays when Grant had kissed her goodbye and said Bennett Capital needed him downtown. Claire clicked deeper. Calendar entries appeared beside the receipts. Most were deliberately vague. Private meeting. Dinner. Review. But the location remained the same. The Beaumont was not an office building. It was a luxury condominium tower overlooking Manhattan, the kind of place where privacy cost almost as much as the apartment itself. Claire's stomach tightened. Sophie moved beneath her ribs. We're okay, Claire whispered, though she wasn't sure whether she was reassuring her daughter or herself. She searched the address inside Grant's synchronized email. Dozens of results appeared. Building notices. Delivery confirmations. Reservation receipts. Then one name stopped her breathing. Sabrina Cole. Claire stared at it. Sabrina from the baby shower. Sabrina with the dark hair and immaculate smile. Sabrina who had placed a tiny silver bracelet inside Claire's palm and said Sophie would be surrounded by love. Claire opened the message. It was a dinner confirmation for two at a private restaurant near the Beaumont. Claire Bennett. Sabrina Cole. Date, October 17th. Claire frowned. October 17th meant something. She searched backward. Another reservation appeared exactly 1 year earlier. Same restaurant. Same two names. The note attached to the second reservation read, "Anniversary table requested." Claire's fingers went cold. Anniversary. October 17th was not her wedding anniversary. It wasn't Grant's birthday. It wasn't Sabrina's birthday. Claire opened the oldest receipt she could find. 2 years earlier. October 17th. Champagne. Dinner. A late-night ride ending at the Beaumont. The truth arrived without drama. No scream. No shattered glass. Just dates lining up on a screen. Grant and Sabrina had an anniversary of their own. 2 years. Claire leaned back slowly. She had been married to Grant the entire time. Sophie had not even existed when the affair began. That realization hurt differently. For months, Claire had quietly wondered whether pregnancy had changed her. Whether Grant had stopped seeing her as beautiful when her body began changing. Whether exhaustion had made her less interesting. But the timeline destroyed that cruel little theory. She had not caused this. Pregnancy hadn't created the affair. It had only made Grant careless enough to expose it. A new email notification appeared. Claire almost ignored it. Then she saw Sabrina's name again. Delivery authorized for Unit 2207. Attached was an invoice for flowers and champagne. Claire opened another. Men's shirts delivered to the same unit. Another. Dry cleaning under Grant's name. This wasn't somewhere he visited. He kept clothes there. He received deliveries there. He lived pieces of his life there. Claire looked toward the framed photograph on the library shelf. Grant standing behind her at their pregnancy announcement, both hands wrapped around her waist, smiling for everyone they loved. She turned the photograph face down. Her phone buzzed. "Grant, you there?" Claire's heart slammed against her ribs. She had less than 10 minutes before he expected Sabrina at Unit 2207. Claire typed nothing. Another message arrived. "I'm bringing what we discussed." She stared at the words. What we discussed. Then Grant sent one more. "After tonight, we can finally be done with this." Claire's sadness disappeared beneath something colder. The affair was no longer the only secret. Grant was bringing something to that apartment. Something important enough to end whatever problem he believed stood between him and Sabrina. Claire closed the laptop, picked up her coat, and looked once toward the staircase leading to Sophie's nursery. She still didn't know what Grant planned to bring to Unit 2207, but she knew exactly where our place was now. And before the night ended, Claire Bennett intended to find out what her husband believed he was finally going to be free from. The smartest thing Claire Bennett did that night was let her husband believe she already knew the plan. At 12:27 a.m., Claire sat inside her parked car beneath the rain-soaked trees outside her home, staring at Grant's message. "I'm bringing what we discussed." She had 7 minutes before he expected Sabrina at Unit 2207. 7 minutes to become a woman whose conversations she had never heard. Claire could ask what he meant. She could demand an explanation. One careless question, however, and Grant would know. He would call Sabrina, delete messages, change plans. Whatever he was carrying would disappear before Claire ever saw it. So she typed 2 words. "Bring everything." Delivered. The 3 gray dots appeared almost immediately. Everything. Claire swallowed. Wrong move. Her pulse climbed as rain hammered softly against the windshield. She forced herself to think like Sabrina. 2 years of secrets. 2 years of promises. A woman tired of waiting would not explain herself. She would demand. Claire typed. "You know what I mean." This time Grant waited nearly a minute. Then, "I told you this has to be handled carefully." Claire's eyes narrowed. Handled. She remembered the message from Sabrina's anniversary trail. Grant had apparently been promising a future for years. Claire took another risk. Including Claire's papers? She pressed send before fear could stop her. Silence. 10 seconds. 20. 40. Claire's hands became cold around the phone. Then Grant replied, "Don't use her name in text." Claire stared at the sentence. He hadn't asked what papers. He hadn't corrected her. He knew exactly what she meant. Another message arrived. "I have them." Claire felt Sophie shift beneath her coat. Her hand moved instinctively over her belly. "What are you planning?" She whispered. The phone buzzed again. After she signs, everything gets easier. Claire closed her eyes. For 1 second, the pain almost broke through. She remembered Grant placing his hand over hers during their first ultrasound. She remembered him staring at Sophie's heartbeat on the monitor with tears in his eyes. Now somewhere between those memories and midnight, his pregnant wife had become a signature he needed. Claire opened her eyes. She could grieve tomorrow. Tonight, she needed the truth. Then come now, she typed. Grant answered. I thought you were already there. Claire froze. She had overlooked something obvious. Sabrina apparently had access to Unit 2207. Claire didn't. Before she could decide what to say, another message appeared. Use the guest code if the concierge gives you trouble. 1027 hashtagged. Claire stared. Grant had just opened the door himself. No deception at the front desk. No forced entry. No impossible explanation. He believed Sabrina needed temporary access, and he had provided it. Claire saved screenshots of the entire exchange, forwarded copies to a private email account, then started the car. Manhattan lights waited beyond the wet highway. 28 minutes later, Claire stood beneath the marble canopy of the Beaumont, blonde hair damp from the rain, one hand beneath her pregnant belly. The lobby smelled of polished wood and expensive flowers. Her reflection in the glass doors looked pale, frightened, almost fragile. She didn't feel fragile anymore. Upstairs, an elevator carried her toward the 22nd floor. Ding! The doors opened onto a silent corridor. 2203, 2205, 2207. Claire stopped before the door. Her heartbeat filled her ears. She entered the code Grant had sent. 1-0-2-7- hashtag. A green light appeared. Click. Claire wrapped her fingers around the handle. Behind that door was the place her husband called ours. And in less than 20 minutes, Grant Bennett was coming there with papers he believed would finally set him free. Claire, this isn't what it looks like. Grant Bennett said it before she even touched the folder. Claire almost smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because after 2 years of deception, her husband had chosen the most predictable sentence possible. She remained seated beneath the warm apartment light, 7 months pregnant, one hand resting over Sophie while Grant stood across from her in his rain-damp coat. Then show me what it looks like. Grant's eyes moved toward the door. Calculation replaced shock. How did you get in here? You gave me the code. His face changed. Claire watched the exact second he understood. The wrong text. The replies. Sabrina's name. That was you. The folder, Grant. Claire, you're emotional. There it was. Not an apology. A diagnosis. You're pregnant, it's after midnight, and whatever you think you discovered, the folder. Her voice stayed quiet. Grant tightened his jaw. This agreement protects Bennett Capital during the acquisition. Then you shouldn't mind me reading it. Silence. Finally, he placed the leather folder on the table. Claire opened it. The first pages were deliberately ordinary, restructuring language, ownership schedules, acquisition provisions. Then she reached the postnuptial agreement. Her eyes moved slowly across the clauses. Separate property. Waiver of future claims. Limitations involving company interests. New holding entities she had never seen. Claire turned another page. A proposed execution date appeared. Before Sophie's birth. Another document outlined transfers scheduled immediately afterward. You were moving assets. I was restructuring them. Before divorcing me. Grant looked away. That was answer enough. Claire found an email printed behind the agreement. Keep marital execution separate from planned filing. Avoid unnecessary disclosure until signatures are complete. Her fingers went still. This wasn't panic after an affair had gone wrong. It was preparation. A timeline. A strategy. Grant had been planning the end of their marriage while Claire was decorating their daughter's nursery. When? She asked. When what? When were you going to leave? Grant exhaled sharply. Don't do this. Claire looked up. After Sophie was born? His silence lasted 2 seconds too long. She nodded. After Sophie. I was trying to make this clean. Clean. Claire's voice finally cracked. You were going to let me give birth, put papers in front of me while I trusted you, and call that clean? Grant stepped closer. You don't understand what's at stake. Then explain it. His restraint broke. I can't lose what I spent 15 years building. The apartment became silent. Claire saw the old office again. The cheap desks. The nights she corrected investor presentations. The savings she contributed when Grant couldn't cover payroll. The dinners she hosted for people who later became his clients. 15 years building. As if she had been furniture in the room. You mean what we built? Grant shook his head. You supported me. Claire stared at him. That's what you call it now. This isn't about love. His voice turned cold. It's business. Something inside Claire finally stopped hurting. Not because she had forgiven him. Because the man standing before her was no longer the man she was trying to save. Then you shouldn't have used our marriage to build it. Grant's mouth tightened. Before he could answer, the apartment doorbell rang. Once. Both of them froze. Then again. Grant looked toward the entrance, and for the first time that night, genuine fear crossed his face. Claire didn't need to ask who was outside. She already knew. A woman who believed Unit 2207 belonged to her future. A woman who believed Claire was the obstacle. A woman Grant had apparently been lying to for 2 years. The doorbell rang a third time. Claire closed the postnuptial agreement and looked at her husband. You wanted everything handled tonight. She nodded toward the door. Let's finish it. He told me you already knew. Sabrina Cole stood outside Unit 2207 with one hand still raised toward the doorbell, rain glistening across her dark hair and black wool coat. Claire watched the color drain from Grant's face. Sabrina, go home. His voice was low, controlled. Sabrina looked past him and saw Claire sitting beside the open postnuptial agreement. Her expression changed from confusion to shock. What is she doing here? Claire rose carefully, one hand supporting her pregnant belly. Apparently, finding out where my husband spends Thursday nights. Sabrina stared at Grant. You said she knew. Silence. Claire caught the words immediately. I knew what? Nothing, Grant said. Both of you are upset. We're not doing this tonight. Claire almost admired the instinct. Cornered between two women, Grant still believed he could schedule the truth for a more convenient time. Sabrina stepped inside. You told me your marriage was over. Claire looked at her. When? Sabrina hesitated. 2 years ago. The answer still hurt, even though Claire already knew the timeline. And he told you I knew about you? Sabrina nodded slowly. He said you stayed married for appearances. Then you got pregnant. Her eyes dropped toward Claire's belly. He said you were using the baby to delay the divorce. Claire's face went still. Sophie moved beneath her hand. Grant stepped forward. That's not what I said. Sabrina turned on him. That is exactly what you said. Claire looked at Grant. Interesting. Because 10 minutes ago, you told me she meant nothing. Sabrina's eyes snapped toward him. You said what? She's twisting this. Am I? Claire asked. You told me Sabrina pursued you. You called it a mistake. Sabrina gave a short, disbelieving laugh. A 2-year mistake? Grant's jaw tightened. Enough. But neither woman stopped. Claire nodded toward the photographs lining the shelf. Did he tell you he was planning another child with you? Sabrina's expression softened for half a second. He said after the divorce, we'd start a family. Claire glanced toward the fertility clinic photograph. 2 women had been promised futures by the same man. Only one of them had been told the other woman knew. Sabrina finally noticed the documents on the table. Is that the agreement? Claire nodded. The one he planned to have me sign before Sophie was born. Sabrina looked at Grant. Something inside her expression broke. You said she agreed to protect the company. Grant stepped closer. Sabrina, stop talking. Why? Her voice sharpened. Because she might find out about the apartment? Claire answered quietly. Already did. Sabrina's eyes moved toward the corporate papers. Then she looked back at Grant. What about the expenses? Grant froze. Claire noticed. What expenses? Nothing, Grant said immediately. Sabrina laughed again, but now there was anger beneath it. The rent. Napa. Restaurants. Flights. He ran some of it through Bennett Capital. Claire turned toward her husband. Company money? Reimbursements, Grant snapped. Legitimate expenses. Sabrina reached into her handbag. Grant moved instantly. Give me your phone. No, Sabrina. Don't. She stepped backward. Grant stopped, but his polished calm had vanished. Sabrina unlocked the screen. I kept the emails because you kept changing your story. Grant's face went pale. Delete them. Claire watched him. There it was. Not denial. Fear. Sabrina looked at Claire. There are invoices, approvals, transfers. And another account. Claire's pulse slowed instead of quickening. What account? Grant stared at Sabrina as if willing her into silence. She didn't give it to him. The one he told me you would never find. The room became perfectly still. Outside, Manhattan glittered beneath the rain. Inside Unit 2207, Claire finally understood something far more dangerous than the affair. Grant hadn't built one secret life. He had built a financial system to protect it. Claire's lawyer was careful about one point from the beginning. A draft postnuptial agreement did not, by itself, decide who owned Bennett Capital or what Claire would receive in a divorce. Property acquired during a marriage could be treated differently from separate property, and a business interest could require valuation rather than a simplistic 50-50 split. Claire therefore refused to sign the draft, preserve the communications she already had lawful access to, and let counsel request formal disclosure. Her goal was not to seize Grant's company. It was to prevent a private pressure campaign from replacing an orderly legal process. 3 weeks later, Claire Bennett sat in a conference room at her family law firm while Grant discovered that the most expensive part of a lie is often the record it creates. There was no boardroom ambush. Claire had no seat on Bennett Capital's board and no authority to discipline its founder. She did not need either. At 9:15 that morning, she and Grant were scheduled to discuss temporary financial arrangements, preservation of marital records, and the practical months ahead before Sophie's birth. Claire sat beside her attorney with a yellow legal pad and a glass of water. Grant arrived with 2 lawyers of his own and the same controlled expression he had worn in Unit 2207. He looked at Claire once. "You've made this much bigger than it needed to be." Claire's attorney answered before she could. "Then the documents should make it smaller." A neutral forensic accountant joined by video. Her assignment was limited: identify accounts relevant to the marital estate, trace transactions already disclosed or lawfully obtained, and flag items requiring formal explanation. Nobody called Grant a criminal. Nobody claimed the affair itself changed ownership of Bennett Capital. The screen showed Unit 2207, then reimbursements, then travel and dining charges, then the timing of the proposed post-nuptial agreement against internal restructuring schedules. Grant leaned back. "Those are corporate matters." "Some may be," the accountant said. "Some appear personal. We are not deciding that today." That sentence changed the room. Claire had spent weeks learning the difference between suspicion and proof. She no longer needed dramatic certainty. She needed records that could be tested. Her attorney slid a proposed preservation stipulation across the table. It required both spouses to retain relevant financial records and prohibited either side from destroying or altering material documents while disclosure continued. Grant's counsel read it carefully. Grant looked at Claire. "You want to freeze my company?" "No," she said. "I want both of us to stop pretending private promises can replace disclosure." His jaw tightened. Then one of Grant's corporate lawyers entered the room unexpectedly. He spoke quietly to Grant's counsel, but Claire saw the change immediately. Grant turned. "What happened?" The lawyer hesitated. "The acquisition closing has been postponed." Grant stared at him. "Why?" Bennett Capital's independent directors received information from Sabrina through her counsel. They opened a compliance review this morning. The financing parties were notified that the company needs time to answer governance questions before closing. Claire said nothing. Grant looked across the table as if she had personally called every lender in Manhattan. "You did this?" "No," Claire replied. "Sabrina hired her own lawyer. Your directors made their own decision. The lenders made theirs." For once, the consequences did not belong to Claire. That mattered. The acquisition had not vanished. Bennett Capital had not collapsed. Grant had not lost his shares. A closing had been delayed because people responsible for other people's money wanted answers before signing. Grant's shoulders dropped a fraction. His attorney returned to the preservation agreement. "We can agree to this with revisions." Claire nodded. "Good." There was no victory speech. For the next 2 hours, they discussed temporary household expenses, medical costs surrounding Sophie's birth, access to records, and a communication protocol. Grant tried twice to turn the conversation toward reconciliation. Claire's attorney redirected him both times. At noon, Claire stepped into the hallway. Sabrina's lawyer had separately confirmed that Sabrina would cooperate with Bennett Capital's independent review. Sabrina was not portrayed as a hero. She had participated in an affair and had helped conceal it. But she was entitled to counsel, and the company was entitled to investigate before deciding what employment consequences were warranted. Claire rested one hand over Sophie as the baby moved. She had once imagined justice as a door slamming in Grant's face. It was not. It was slower. A preserved record. A postponed closing. A neutral accountant asking a question twice when the first answer did not make sense. A pregnant woman refusing to sign away rights she had not yet had independently explained. Grant still had money when he left the building. He still had a company. He still had the opportunity to become a responsible father. What he no longer had was the ability to make every problem disappear simply because he called it business. 8 months later, Claire Bennett received another message from Grant. This time, she didn't stop breathing. She didn't search for hidden meanings. She didn't wonder who he was really talking to. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows of a smaller house in Connecticut, touching pale wooden floors and the soft yellow blanket wrapped around the sleeping baby in Claire's arms. Sophie Bennett was 5 months old, healthy, curious, perfectly unaware that before she had taken her first breath, her parents' marriage had already ended in everything but paperwork. Claire looked down as Sophie's tiny fingers curled around hers. "Good morning, beautiful," she whispered. After months of disclosure, valuation, and negotiation, they had reached a settlement, and a final judgment of divorce had recently been entered. The independent investigation at Bennett Capital had continued long after Grant was placed on administrative leave. Bennett Capital survived, and Grant remained wealthy, but the authority he once treated as permanent had changed. The consequences were quieter than the fantasies people tell about revenge. He lost executive authority while the board dealt with the financial issues his decisions had created. Sabrina left Bennett Capital and cooperated through counsel regarding the records she had retained. Claire received the protections and financial interests negotiated through the divorce process after disclosure and valuation. The settlement was not a prize for being betrayed, and it did not turn her into the owner of Grant's company. Just consequences arriving where lies had once been. Her phone buzzed again on the kitchen counter. Grant. Claire stared at his name. Months earlier, those 5 letters could change the temperature of a room. Now they were simply letters on glass. She opened the message. "I know I don't deserve another chance." Claire said nothing. Another appeared. "I was wrong about everything." Sophie shifted against her chest. Claire gently rocked her. She remembered the nursery that night. Rain on the windows. The pink blanket embroidered with Sophie's name. Then the message that had changed everything. "It's over. Delete our pictures. Don't contact me again. Wrong number. Wrong woman. One irreversible mistake." Claire had spent months believing that text destroyed her marriage. Now she understood it hadn't. It had only illuminated what was already broken. The phone buzzed a third time. "Can I come over?" Claire froze. "Come over." 2 words returned from the beginning of the story like an echo. That first night, she had typed them while pretending to be Sabrina. "Come over. I'll make you forget." She had needed Grant to believe a door was open so she could discover what stood behind his. Now Grant was asking for the same thing. A door. A conversation. Another chance to explain what explanations could no longer repair. Claire walked toward the window with Sophie in her arms. Outside, late summer light warmed the trees. A woman pushed a stroller along the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower started. Ordinary life. Claire had once thought ordinary meant boring. After Grant, ordinary felt expensive. Her phone buzzed again. "Please, Claire." She looked at it for several seconds. She could answer with anger. She could remind him about Unit 2207, Sabrina, the fertility clinic photograph, the postnup, the hidden expenses, the boardroom. She could write the perfect final sentence and make sure he understood exactly what he had lost. Claire did none of those things. She locked the screen. Then she placed the phone face down. For years, Grant had done that at dinner to hide another life. Claire did it now because she finally had a life she no longer needed him to enter. Sophie opened her blue eyes. Claire smiled and kissed her forehead. Behind them, the phone remained silent. There was no speech and no audience waiting to applaud. Just a woman holding her daughter in a peaceful room and realizing she had survived the future someone else planned for her. Grant Bennett had spent years believing money could open any door. He learned too late that the most valuable one was never his to own. And this time, when he asked to come over, Claire's silence was the answer. In the months that followed, Claire kept communication with Grant practical and centered on Sophie. She never asked their daughter to carry adult resentment. When Grant showed up consistently, Claire acknowledged it. When he tried to turn parenting conversations into pleas for reconciliation, she returned to the boundary they had agreed on. Her victory was not making him lonely. It was giving Sophie 2 parents who could tell the truth about their responsibilities, even after they could no longer share a marriage.